All right, guys, we are live on YouTube, and I'm so excited because we've got Ian Westerman from Essential Tennis. Say hey, Ian.
Hey, everybody. What's going on?
So really excited about this. I'm Pete from CrunchTimeCoaching.com, and you made a really smart decision today by checking out today's live hangout, because Ian is maybe the most well-known online instructor with this, and he's with Essential Tennis. And today he's going to teach us a very important topic, I might add, a very difficult one to really get any kind of progress with, and that is the mind. So today Ian is going to cover 5 steps to mastering the mental game of tennis. And it's really, really great stuff. Again, my name is Peter Freeman from Crunch Time Coaching. I live here in Atlanta. I love to teach tennis both on the court and online. I'm a USPTA elite professional, and my YouTube channel has been named top 10 instruction channels in the world by lessons.com. But today we've got a real heavy hitter. We got Ian Westerman from Essential Tennis, and he lives in Wisconsin with his wife, Allison. And what are your 2 kids' names, Ian?
Lucy and Joel.
And did Lucy just have a birthday? Is that what I saw?
It's her birthday today. Yeah, she just turned 7.
She just turned 7. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you said that she's taught you a lot, huh?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, every day is a learning process with them for ourselves and obviously them as people as well. So yeah, it's a crazy trip.
What's the biggest thing you've learned from Lucy?
Oh, geez. Well, she was born with a lot of food allergies. And so really early on, it became apparent that we had to really closely take a look at what we were eating. And so that's probably been, for us, like the biggest part of our journey with her is learning about her, like what she needs to develop, into a strong, healthy human being. And that's informed our own decisions to a large scale as well. So it's been really big for us.
Yeah, I've worried about you for a while. I've always thought, man, Ian's got a real weight problem, but he's eating so much food.
I do have a weight problem. Yeah, I'm in the enviable position of having the reverse problem that most people do. When I stop working out, my weight drops immediately.
Yeah, no, you're in great shape. So I didn't get to finish. So Ian has, because I think this is just amazing, it's 83,000 subscribers on YouTube. And 34,000 people like his page on Facebook, and so it's going to be a lot of fun today. So Ian's going to help you with a mental game, which I think is a challenge. But Ian, before we get into this, watching that 3-part series that you did, you had your own challenges with the mental side of tennis. Would you like to share that at all with anybody?
Yeah, sure.
I'll share my stories too.
Oh man. Yeah, I had huge mental demons. It didn't start for me until college. In high school, I only played 2 years of competitive high school tennis because I was homeschooled until I was a junior in high school. And I went to a small private school here in Wisconsin. And I was kind of a medium-sized fish in a really little pond. Like there weren't a lot of tennis players there, and so I walked on and was immediately #1 singles, and I was like the man for tennis in that small little world. And then when I went to college, everything changed because I didn't make the team my freshman year, and that just kind of, I doubled down. My motivation and my intensity, my practice time is like my biggest goal was to play college tennis. And I made the team my sophomore year, my second year, but I was in the reverse position that I was all throughout kind of my junior playing career as a tennis player. I was the lowest man on the totem pole. I was #6 singles, #3 doubles. And so I all of a sudden, my role was really reversed, and I had a really hard time dealing with being the weakest person there. And my expectations for myself were so incredibly high for my performance. And this just kind of built during the 3 years that I played college tennis, to where by the end of my college career on the court, I was unhappy. Every day I was on the court, and it just kind of struck me suddenly, I think during a practice session, Like this was like the biggest passion of my life, was to play tennis, to be around it. Is why I was going to this school, was to get a degree so I could be in the tennis community, be in the tennis industry. And I realized kind of suddenly that, man, I'm unhappy playing tennis like every day. And so yeah, I got to a point where it was like I knew something was wrong, and I knew something had to change. And it was kind of a rude awakening for me, realizing how far I had kind of slipped down that slope.
Yeah, I think anybody who's played tennis for a decent amount of time probably goes through that whole period of the love-hate thing, to where at times you're hating tennis more than you love it. And I think we've all been out there and been just so nervous. I played junior tennis. I was a pretty good junior tennis player, and no matter who I was going to play, I would have to go to the restroom like 15 times. It was like a Rafael Nadal, just like really weird ritual that I had, because I was so nervous before every match. So I think that this is going to be great for everybody out there. One thing that I think is very timely is, I just saw a video the other day of Ryan Harrison. He just won in Memphis, and it meant a lot to him. He teared up. He thanked his parents a lot. But he was out there on this grass court kind of playing this satellite tournament where no one was there, and he loses the match, and he chucks his racket. After he shakes the hand of the umpire, he chucks his racket. He yelled a pretty loud obscenity. And then the ball girl brings him back his racket, and then he takes it and he throws it as far as he could in the woods. And I mean, we've all just had those meltdown experiences. So yeah. I think if you're somebody who, has experienced any of this, it's going to be a little different, because I don't think, Ian, you're not going to be teaching people to like breathe out of their eyelids or do any chants today. Is that right?
No, not at all. In fact, and I've been through kind of a long journey with learning about this myself, learning what works for me, and then bringing kind of that process or that those concepts to my audience and seeing how it works for them. And in my opinion and in my experience, kind of the standard, typical, traditional kind of approach of rituals and self-affirmations, kind of the whole fake it till you make it approach, I think is just broken. I don't believe that it works. It's definitely what I tried all throughout my college career, and sometimes stuff would help a little bit, and then the next match or the next practice session it wouldn't, and I'd be right back at square one. So no, the things that we're going to go through, 5 different main topics we're going to talk about. 3 of them are more conceptual. 3 of them are, I think, understanding how we're wired as humans, understanding how the brain works and how the mind works is critical. If we don't have that base understanding of how we work internally and how that relates to tennis, then I think it's really hard to respond appropriately when we're in those moments of pressure. And then number 4 and number 5 are more practical, more actual kind of how-to. But for me, I think the biggest parts are more understanding, and that's what numbers 1, 2, and 3 are going to be.
Awesome. So guys, hold on your seatbelts. This is going to be a lot of fun. It's definitely for people, I think, that have had these challenges, but also have an open mind, and you still have some faith and belief that there's something out there that can work for you. And I know that this is really going to be great for everybody. And then if you stick around to the end, I'm going to tell you guys how you can get a hold of his 3-part series they actually did. And it was excellent. I watched every one, and he also used just real life people out there that probably look and play a lot like you, and they had reached their boiling point of just being totally frustrated and tired of losing. And then they went through this system, and they're telling you firsthand how it really impacted their tennis and their lives, and how it just made them feel better all around. I mean, it's amazing, if you love tennis, how crappy sometimes it can make you feel off the court too. And then when you finally get it right, how great you feel in all aspects of your life. So Ian, why don't you walk us through these 5 steps right now?
Sure. I think I'll segue off of something that you just said, was that our focus and really everything that I create and everything that you create as well, Pete, is really focused towards passionate amateur tennis players, amateur athletes. I don't like the word club player or rec player. Amateur, it kind of a little bit has a negative annotation to it as well. But you know, I put myself in that category as well. We're not competing for a living. We're not getting checks, playing tournaments, and so we're kind of all in this boat together. And I think what's important to understand is that we're in the exact same mental toughness boat as all of our favorite players are that are on TV. We're all in the same place. And even our biggest heroes get nervous and they deal with anxiety. I actually have a quote here just to illustrate this from Stan Wawrinka. This was taken from the press conference with him after he won the 2016 US Open. He was playing against Djokovic. And this is a quote from him from that press conference. He said, before the final, going into the finals for his third Grand Slam championship, potentially third Grand Slam championship, he said, before the final, I was really nervous like never before. I was shaking in the locker room. When we started talking 5 minutes prior to the match, the last few things with Magnus, I started to cry, his coach, Magnus. I was completely shaking, but the only thing I was convinced of with myself was that my game was there. Physically, I was there. My game was somewhere there inside me. Just put the fight on the court and you'll have a chance to win, he said, is what he was telling himself. So not many of like the elite players are open enough and vulnerable enough to talk about this, but the bigger the stage, the more of this kind of emotional and psychological response that we have, you know, to pressure. And this is somebody who he's already won multiple Grand Slams before this particular match, but even then, he has like his most extreme visceral, you know, response to the pressure that's on him in this situation. And this is just one example. I've seen many examples. I'm sure you have as well, Pete. A year or two ago, Nadal came out and said that he was doubting himself and he just didn't really know where his confidence was anymore. I mean, this is like the poster child for confidence. And so I think it's really important for everybody watching and us included to understand that we are in the same boat as them. All of our heroes get nervous, and it's not only normal, but it's a good sign. It shows that we care about it. And of course, you know, we've invested all this time, all this effort, the repetitions, the money, into the time, into getting to wherever we each of us are in our abilities and our skills. And so, yeah, it's important to us. And of course, we're going to have some feelings of anxiousness and nervousness. It's totally normal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a good point there. I think it's a mistake to try and say, well, I'm going to work on this until I can just make the nerves go away, because I think that's impossible. And I think once you realize that there's nothing wrong with you for being nervous, and do realize that the other person on the other side of that is just as nervous as you are, even if they don't look it, they are. That kind of definitely helped me, I know for sure.
Absolutely. That's a perfect segue into my second point, which is, again, it's just kind of all about perspective and understanding. My second point is understand and accept that you can get nervous and be mentally tough. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, where if you get nervous or if you get anxious, then that signifies a lack of mental toughness. It's not at all the case. The difference between mentally tough athletes and players that are not as mentally tough is not the occurrence or absence of nervousness, but rather that athlete's response to those emotions and to those feelings. A player who's really mentally tough will feel the same feelings, as you said, Pete, as the player on the other side of the net, but the person who's more mentally tough will feel those same feelings, and the response is, oh yeah, like this is what it's all about. Now it's go time. Like this is what I do this, for moments like this. Whereas the person on the other side of the net who's feeling the exact same thing is saying to themselves, oh no, like, oh crap, like what have I gotten myself into? What happens if this, that, the other thing, et cetera. That tape plays in our head of all the different fears that we have about potential outcome of this match. And so it's critical to understand that it's all about how we process those feelings. It's all about how we respond. It's not about whether or not those feelings are present.
So how do we what's the trick? Because I think you made a really good point where people it's the fight or flight, right? To where you're either going, oh yeah, this is awesome, I'm nervous, but hey, I knew I was gonna be nervous and I'm jacked up right now, versus, oh my gosh, here I am again, I feel sick to my stomach, I wish I could just crawl under a rock right now, what have I got myself into? Especially if you've been one of those people who feels like that, how can you possibly turn such a strong feeling around? Is it possible?
It's definitely possible. That's actually point number 3, which we'll get to in a second. Like, we can develop the ability. It's 100% possible. I think a big part of it is perspective and having the correct response. And we can train that response. And for me, I think there's 3 kind of themes for me that really help me stay present in that moment and actually appreciate it. And that's actually key number 1 is, for me, understanding that this is like, Billie Jean King has the book called, It's a Privilege. What is it? Competition is a Privilege, I think it is. Is that it? Or no, Pressure? No, it's Pressure is a Privilege.
That's a great title.
Yeah. And so like, it is an incredible title, and I agree 100%. Just the fact that we showed up that day and we have the physical ability to be on that court and compete in an athletic endeavor. It doesn't matter what level. The fact that you're there that day, you've put in the work, like, you should be proud of yourself and really appreciate the fact that you get to experience those couple minutes, hours, or whatever it is. And then number 2, I think just loving that experience. You can, in time, with the right perspective, actually enjoy that environment. And this has been probably the biggest turning point for me, has been, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later, as far as like the how, or the nuts and bolts of it. But the biggest turning point for me has been having those same physical experiences, but the mental reaction, the emotional response to it is totally different. Now it's actually, I view it as a positive. Like, it's such an amazing thing that I get to experience that experience.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I think also, what do you think about the idea of when you feel something mentally, are there physical things you can do to kind of get yourself over those mental hurdles?
I mean, we're all different. We're all wired differently, is the thing. Like, if for players out there, sometimes some people are able to feel a little bit more calm when they feel anxious on the inside. They've got to do something on the outside, whether it's fidgeting with their strings or bouncing up and down, while they're waiting for their match to get called, jumping rope or whatever, warming up, stretching, doing some shuffle steps, karaoke steps, whatever. Everybody's different. You see some players, like, with their headphones on, like, and athletes in all sports, sitting there with their headphones on, their eyes closed, like they're just being calm and still. Other athletes in different disciplines they got to be up and moving around. So I think it's a kind of a personalized thing, and it's something that we have to experiment with and treat that as just kind of part of the journey, and something we get to learn about ourselves and maximize our performance in that way.
Yeah, I think maybe what you're saying, or what I'm getting out of that, is whatever you believe works for you, it does, right?
And yeah, there's no doubt. There can be some placebo, effect at play here. But I think what everybody's most interested in, that's watching right now, is they want long-term, big picture solutions, to their mental toughness problems. And so I think I'm against anything that's like you're trying to trick yourself or fool yourself into thinking you're doing better than you really are, mentally or otherwise. And so I think there are real things that work for different people, whether it's the calmness, the stillness, or the fidgeting, the moving around, the activity. And so I think people need to try different things and pay attention to what their response is, their performance response. And then slowly, it's just like the rest of our game, our serve, our forehand, whatever, slowly make incremental changes, improvements, adjustments, and optimize as you try different things.
That's good too. I like how you said that. It's like working on your forehand or your serve. It's not a magic pill you can take, but you can see progress. I think that's important. And one thing that I think you were mentioning the other day is that there's also misconceptions out there, or lies, as far as what people have been told to believe works with kind of improving your mind. It really doesn't work as well as you think it should. So can you kind of go into what you were alluding to the other day?
Yeah, absolutely. I've kind of just rewritten those. These first 3 points were the lies. I can't remember how they were worded originally, but lie number one was basically we believe, or we've been told, that these elite high performing athletes don't get nervous. Like there's ice in their veins or whatever, and they're just on another plane than we are. And the fact of the matter is, they're just much better at processing it and dealing with it, or embracing it actually, and using it in their favor. Whereas most of us who struggle in competition, it's the opposite. Lie number two is that if you get nervous, then you're not mentally tough, and that's not true. And then lie number three, next point was that you're either born with mental toughness or you're not. Like, it's some kind of inherent, thing. And I think a lot of people assume this, that they're, Sally or Dave or whoever at their local courts who just seems to be tough as nails no matter what the situation is. I think we all seem to assume, most people seem to assume, that they're just mentally tough, and I'm not. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. We can develop mental toughness, and I kind of view this. And a second ago, we were talking about making small tweaks, small adjustments, optimizing, paying close attention to what improves our performance and what doesn't. Paying close attention is really such a huge part of it. But as we do that, it's like the forehand or the serve that we talked about. It's like working out at the gym, where we put our muscles under stress, we put our muscles under strain, and then over time, as we do that, they become more resilient, they become stronger, and we become stronger. And it's the same thing with, I like to refer to it as mental muscle. It's the same thing. If we shy away from competitive environments, like some people shy away from working out, shy away from the gym, then you can't be surprised when you have to perform under pressure and you totally crumble and fold, and you just can't perform the way that you can play. I think a lot of players feel that stress, they feel that anxiety, and they shrink and they withdraw themselves. They start to put excuses out there, saying that they're off that day, and this match doesn't mean anything to me anyway. They protect themselves, they insulate themselves from that environment, and so they never actually develop the ability to respond in a healthy way to pressure or anxiety. But we can develop it, Pete, and everybody else watching. You absolutely can. It's all about putting ourselves in those situations, being open to the experience, and then making small adjustments, optimizing. And points 4 and 5, we're going to talk more about kind of practical things that we can do to improve our experience.
Very cool. Before you go into points 4 and 5, you just gave me a flashback memory. It was one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard. I was the assistant coach at East Carolina University, and Bill Moore was the head coach, and he was just very inspirational. He gave some of the greatest speeches, and he gave this speech on life, love, and caring to the team. And he was talking about how you can choose to care and pushing the envelope, and how so few people are afraid to actually try their absolute hardest, even on a subconscious level, even though they're not aware that they're not trying their hardest. They're just not trying their hardest out there, physically, mentally preparing, because then at the end of the day, they can justify themselves, like you kind of pointed out. Well, I lost today because I don't work as hard as I should in practice, or because I went out last night and I have a hangover. It was college, right? Different things like that, or more at the amateur level and when people are playing their club matches, I've heard over and over again, I'm sure you've heard it too, I just don't play well against that style player. Mainly the pusher always gets victimized with that as an excuse. Like they don't play real tennis, so therefore it's okay. Rather than looking at that as, that's a real tennis player you have to figure out, and they give you real problems that you have to learn how to master and beat. So very cool. So where do we go from here? What's the next step?
All right. So now that we've gotten kind of more of the conceptual understanding things out of the way, we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do practically. And at the end of the day, there's not much to do. And this is kind of one of the harder things that, quite frankly, took me a while to actually accept and understand, because, like you, Pete, I've spent my entire career teaching tennis, and I'm a very process, oriented person. Like, just give me the checklist, give me the steps so I can follow them. And when I get to step number 10 and I check that off, then I will have arrived, and I'll be mentally tough. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. We're much more complicated beings than that, where we can just kind of go through a checklist. But I think the traditional approach to mental toughness is they've very much have tried to make that happen. Here's the ritual, whatever, put your head down, fix your strings, like look at your shoes, like plan the next point, walk up to the baseline, like whatever. Like, we've tried to come up with a magic formula. And if it was about a formula, then it would work for everybody. If it was formulaic based, it was formula based, then Sally 3-0 player and Dave 4-0 player and Jim 5-0 player could all do the same process and they'd all be mentally tough. But it doesn't work that way. Just a little side rant there. But point number 4 that I want to talk about, and the first kind of practical thing, is start observing your thoughts instead of judging them. Meaning, be aware of what's going on in your head, but just because things are going through your mind doesn't mean that you need to take them seriously, and it doesn't mean that you need to dwell on them. And I think this is the downward spiral that most tennis players get caught in, is they have that thought pop into their head, whether it be, and it's not just negative thoughts, it's positive thoughts too. A classic negative thought that pops into our head all the time is, crap, what if I lose this match? What if I lose to Shirley, or whoever the player is? Man, I've never lost to her before. What if I lose? Would be like a classic negative thought. Positive thought can derail us as well. Oh man, what if I win? What if I finally beat Jim? I've never beaten Jim before. And that can cause a big decline in performance as well. If we take that thought, we grab onto it, and we make that our focus within our dialogue, within our internal dialogue moving forwards. And what both those things are focused on is something other than the present. They're focused on, both of those examples are focused on the future. What happens if? Example of a past thought could be, oh crap, last time I was in this situation, the outcome was terrible. Like, the last time I was up 5-1 in a set, I blew it and I lost. And so all of a sudden we grab onto that, and there's this downward spiral of performance because we get fixated on whatever that thought is. So my practical, thing that we all need to try to do better, in my opinion, and I've been working on this for a couple years now, is it's fine to be aware of those thoughts, because just the fact that they pop into our head, again, doesn't mean that we're not mentally tough. It doesn't mean that we can't be good performers, but it's vital to understand that just as quickly as that thought came, we have the choice to just let it go and let it pass on its way. One of my favorite illustrations that I've heard related to this is the whole idea that thoughts are constantly moving through our head, whether we want them to or not. A big misconception I've heard from tennis players is that the concept of mental toughness means that somehow there's like nothing going on up there, and we're just like empty and blank, and it's just kind of like on autopilot, and we're not robots. We can't, the only way that nothing could be going on up there is if we're literally dead. So that's not the goal. Please don't try to do that, because it's impossible. The best illustration I've heard of this is subway car analogy. Thoughts are like subway cars. Just imagine yourself standing there. I don't know if you've been to New York City or any other, city that's got a, mass transit, subway system, and different cars come. Sometimes it's the blue line, sometimes it's the A train, whatever. We can choose which train to get on. Just because a train comes doesn't mean you have to get on that train and follow it to wherever its final destination is. And so trains will always be coming, they'll always be going, and it's our choice what we want to dwell on and what we want to hold on to. And I think most of us are stuck in a really deep pattern of grabbing onto that same familiar train that takes us to a place that we don't want to go. But it's our pattern, it's what we're used to. And so even though it's self-defeating, it's what we're, it's kind of what we've trained ourselves to do.
Yeah, that's so powerful. The whole kind of, oh yeah, here we go again, I think is definitely a train that a lot of people have gotten on. I've certainly been on that train many times. And one thing that you mentioned as far as you're not going to be able to stop the thoughts and the moments and reading Open from Agassi. It's amazing how many small moments and matches, and he's literally telling you in the book exactly what he's thinking, like negative things, positive things, how he feels about his opponent, whether it's positive or negative. And even Rafa's book, he's talking about the first point and hitting a specific forehand inside out, and it lands in. It didn't even win the point. All of a sudden, he feels good about that, and so it is a constant, just like thoughts going like crazy. And these greatest players of all time can even remember all these small micro little things going on in their head years later. So it is certainly impossible to, just let them all go. Even Federer, when he just won the Australian Open, there was like a serve that I guess got overruled. I forget it went in his favor, out of his favor, but it was right before he won the match. And he thought, oh, great, now I'm going to lose the match because this happened. And then he turned around and he won the match, but he was actually thinking about losing the match, just a couple points before, because the shot spot didn't work out the way he wanted it to.
I remember actually hearing that exact same, I don't know if it was on a YouTube video or whatever, but I heard him say that. And then in the moment that I watched the video, that didn't click with me, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, just consider that, everybody watching for a moment, that Roger Federer is thinking, wow, I might lose now.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the guy who's like the poster child for, historically, maybe not so much the last couple of years, but historically, for just being in the zone and just performing like at his peak over and over and over and over again. Nobody is immune. Yeah, it's such an important lesson to take to heart.
Yeah, making a big deal out of a small deal. Because I remember when I know what he's talking about, I can see the point, I can see the serve. And as a fan, I got a little upset, but I certainly wasn't like, oh, it's over. But Roger was literally worried, like, oh, that might be it. That might be the. So a lot of times we do that to ourselves. We let little things like, oh, here we go again. This guy just hooked me. They always hook me. I always lose because they make this call at this time in the match, and I cannot get over it. And so, yeah, learning to let those things go and to know that you have the power to let them go, that's huge.
It is huge. I think this is another distinguishing factor. Earlier, I can't remember what number point it was, the difference between mentally tough players and non-mentally tough players is not the absence or occurrence of anxiety or pressure or nerves. It's how we deal with them. It's our response, the difference in response. And I think this is another critical pivot point between mentally tough players and non-mentally tough players, is the ability to let go of those thoughts that are not constructive or that take us down a path to worse performance, even though we know it. Like you were kind of pointing out, Pete, I can't remember what the phrase, I think you said, oh, here we go again, or something along those lines. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be the same story over and over and over again. But I think the players that are least mentally tough, they get caught in those dialogues, they get caught in those patterns, and they don't even realize that they have a choice. And so for me, like, this is practical thing number one, and this takes a lot of practice, honestly, It takes a lot of awareness. It takes a lot of kind of self-awareness of what's going on and what the thoughts are that we're grabbing onto, and then what the corresponding difference in performance is. And for most of us, it's really, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm not on the court full time anymore, but when I was, and I would see the same members week after week after week, to us as coaches on the outside, it's so glaringly obvious, what the patterns are. But for us in the moment on the court with the racket in our hand, it's frequently very hard for us to kind of detach from the moments a little bit and kind of be a third party, viewer of our own thoughts and our own actions. The more we can do that, the easier it is to notice the patterns and say, oh, no, I don't have to go down this path. I don't have to take this train. And the more you practice that, the easier it is to let go of those unconstructive things and just play, just be on the court and just do the best you can.
That's very, very cool. Now, did you have one more step? Was that step 4 or was that step 5?
That was 4. Number 5, practical thing, but also I guess kind of conceptual, but not really, because it takes practice, honestly. Step number 5 is start to love the journey more than the idea of the destination. This is such a huge one. And I guess I would just pose a question to everybody watching today. Are you playing? Are you practicing? Are you working? Are you playing? Are you competing for the future? Some picture that we have in our head of you standing, on the podium with the trophy above your head. Are you playing for that? Or are you playing for the present? Are you playing for right now? If your answer, and be honest with yourself, if your answer is this like utopian image in your head of how amazing life will be in the future if we accomplish XYZ, goals, and we defeat, ABC players, whatever it is for you, if that's why you're putting in the repetitions on the court, then it's really hard to be happy. It's really hard to perform our best, because inevitably, when we accomplish those little benchmarks, if your focus is always future framed, once we get to those little benchmarks, all we want to know is, all right, well, what's the next thing? As we're just inherently unsatisfied as humans if it's goal oriented. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad idea to have goals. It's good to have the big picture in mind. It's good to know what your benchmarks are as you move along the path to whatever level you're trying to get to, or whatever level you want to compete at. Whatever your goals are, it's good to have goals. But if that's what's driving you alone, and you're not enjoying what you're doing in the moment, in the present, then it's really easy to get frustrated, because we've kind of have a binary view of success now. Like, either I reach that goal and I'm successful, or I fell short of it today, and so I'm a failure. And I would really challenge everybody out there to really kind of flip that on its head and just view the fact that you're there that day as the success. The fact that you're putting in the repetitions, that you're focused, you're putting in the effort, you're trying your best. Like, those, it might sound corny, but if you don't view that as your success, then, and this is the pattern that I found myself in college, was essentially what it came down to for me by the end of my college career. If I didn't play perfect, then I failed that day. And the more and more I think that we have this picture in our head of like future like success, the easier it is to fall into a negative cycle.
What's so funny is that, to me, is just like so powerful in all aspects of life, to where,
Absolutely.
When you're growing up, it's always about, if you're not first or last, and just like, it's all about the championship and the person holding the trophy. And somehow that in mainstream kind of society, that's what we learn and see. But if you are really seeking out success in anything, the more you start to study all these successful people, and it doesn't matter whether it's tennis or whatever it is, they all talk about the journey. Even Andre Agassi said once he learned that it was about the journey, he's like, you see me being number one as the accomplishment. And really, it was all the steps I was doing to get to number one. That is what I'm really proud of. It's the journey of getting there. And you nailed it on the head too, when you're like, once you set a goal that you don't think is possible, and if it's just if you're only gonna be happy once you get to that goal, you're never gonna be happy, because once you get to that goal, you're like, yeah, that was good, but I did that last week, and now I'm stuck in that goal. I wanna get to this goal, and so until I get to that goal, then I'll be happy. And it's even something I work on a lot in my life, because with teaching tennis and with doing the online thing, which is challenging, I was always like, man, if I could ever just do this, if I could ever just get this many people or that many people, I'd be set. And then once you get there, you're like, yeah, but no, that's not good enough either. Yeah. And I've certainly within the last year been more just like, you know what, just the more you do whatever you're doing and you do a good job at it, and you can look back and go, did I do every step possible for myself to put myself to have the most chance of success? I'm proud of that, whether it works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to keep going. And once you know that you're going to keep going, even if something doesn't work, then you can have a lot more confidence in yourself as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I think one of the problems with having the goals define us is the target's always moving. Like you said, like you get to that point, like whatever it is in whatever area of life, and once you get there, it's like, all right, well, it's pretty good, I guess, but I'd like to have more than this. And so it's constantly a moving target. It's like, what's next, and there's never any satisfaction there. And so that can breed what's a synonym for dissatisfaction? That can just breed malcontent on the court. And once that feeling starts to take root, then all of a sudden it kind of paints everything else that we do. Every forehand that hits the net, every time we double fault, all of a sudden all you're fixated on is, well, I'm that much further away from what my next goal is. And so everything just starts to become work, and it's not satisfying anymore. And so I went really far kind of down that rabbit hole. If I can help, just a couple players avoid that. I've heard this referred to before as the arrival fallacy, by the way, which I think is a good phrase for it. There's the whole thought that, all right, well, when I can hit 100-mile-an-hour serve, then I'll be a good player. Like then I'll be happy. Then I will have made it. But inevitably, there's always that next thing. And again, it's, I think, good to have goals. But if that's how we're defining our success or our failure, then on a micro level, from day to day, we can have huge swings in our happiness, and it can get to the point where it's just not worth it anymore. And that's too bad. It happens all the time.
Yeah, cool. Well, we got some questions coming in here. Do you mind taking a couple questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Mike asked, does venting help, hurt, or depends on the player? Venting meaning yelling, racket throwing, etc. Can it be actually a good thing sometimes? People would used to say that McEnroe played better as he got angry.
Sometimes it's a good thing. I would say that it's the exception to the rule when somebody actually plays better. I've experienced personally just one instance, one individual that I played with in college who he really did perform better when there was some kind of controversy. When he had something to be pissed about, the level of his game raised. For the vast majority of us, it's the opposite. For the vast majority of us, it takes us out of the moment. We talked about kind of being present, being in the moment a little bit earlier. For most of us, those annoyances and that anger pull us way outside of that. And all of a sudden we're fixated on what we're angry about instead of focusing on what we need to do to actually beat the person on the other side of the net. And so it becomes like really emotionally entangled. And for most of us, we don't problem solve very well. in that scenario, and we don't think very clearly or very logically. Occasionally, it can be good to just let off some steam. Like for me personally, like letting off steam here and there can be a good thing as long as I quickly then come back to the present moment. We talked before about, you know, appreciation and just relishing kind of that experience that we have. If me personally, if I don't return back to that place pretty quickly, then it becomes a negative, you know, feedback loop really quickly. I've only personally ever seen one person where that negativity was a positive for their performance.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point too. If you're somebody who can, you know, kind of have a little tantrum, if you will, it's not a good thing. It certainly it's not a good look, but you're able to get off the train like you're talking about. So if you're able to get the train, it doesn't hurt you as much. And I have a different theory on McEnroe anyway. It's kind of like a little side tangent, but people would say McEnroe played better when he got angry. But if you really looked at it, well, he was able to control everything. He literally would be able to have rants that lasted 10 minutes plus. And so how could, and so his adrenaline is running the whole time. He is fully involved and focused on what he's doing. And he never kind of like cools down. And since he had such power over the game, his opponent had no choice but to go sit down and say to themselves, okay, chill out here, calm down, try not to focus on what's going on. So of course, when they finally get up after like 10, 15 minutes to play, and McEnroe has been he's basically like still playing sport. And the other guy, it's like he went to the locker room and had to take a nap almost and then go against McEnroe. So, I mean, I don't even think McEnroe lifted his game so much as far as it was inevitable that the other person, there's no way they're going to come out and play as good. So that's just a side tangent. All right, we have some more. How do you suggest immediately combating a negative thought that pops up during competition? And that's from Elizabeth. And guys, you can keep the questions coming, but we are going to try and end this within the next 10 minutes because I know Ian's got lots of stuff to do.
So Elizabeth, I'm guessing you probably didn't see kind of the first part of this video. Is this going to be posted publicly when we're done, Pete?
Yeah, this goes right on YouTube. Yeah.
All right, cool. So Elizabeth, go back and watch the beginning of our conversation because thoughts are not things that need to be combated. And Pete and I were discussing earlier about how just the fact that you have a negative thought doesn't mean that you're not mentally tough. It's much more so our response to those thoughts that come and go. We can, again, earlier I was describing how we have the choice, what we want to fixate on, what we want to focus on, and what we just let go. Thoughts are always coming and going. If you let that negative thought go, something else is going to come along. It's inevitable. We don't have a choice one way or the other. They're always coming and going. And so the bigger problem for most players is not that they have negative thoughts. We all have negative thoughts. The problem is, are we fixating on that thought and allowing that to really paint our experience on the courts and allow it to control our level of performance? That's the bigger issue. And if you go back and watch, like we talk about that in detail a little bit earlier.
Cool. Ed's got a question for us, and I believe I know you out there, Ed. Ed, by the way, did a great job on improving your serve. Do you believe in giving yourself positive feedback, like you've got this, when stepping to hit a second serve to win a game or set, or does that create more pressure?
No, I don't think it creates more pressure. I think this is partially a personality thing. Some people want to be kind of egged on, like they want that little bit of kick in the pants, in big situations, and so they'll give that to themselves. I mean, tennis just tends to drive people crazy in general because we're all alone out there, and so we kind of have to be our own coaches out there, emotionally and tactically and technically and everything else. And so I don't think it's a bad thing, but it should definitely not be touted as like a secret or a tool or a fix or anything like that. For some people that'll work great. Other people, you look back over the years and famous examples of players who did none of that were like Sampras, Borg, players that were just totally level, never really pumped themselves up at all. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got your Connors and your McEnroe and your Rafa that just kind of feed off of that external energy. So Ed, I think you just kind of have to know yourself, how you respond to stimulus like that, emotionally or psychologically. Some players, it stresses them out and they're going to play worse. They don't need that outside, extra kind of stimulus or pressure. Other players tend to be a little more low key, and they play better when they're emotionally a little bit more alert. So I would say pay close attention and optimize.
And optimize. I like that. All right. So Judy asked a question that Mike even said, yeah, ditto Judy's question. So I think this is a good one. When you lose to someone you should not have lost to, how do you get yourself to get your confidence back that you are a good player? Is that the focus on the journey and not the destination? Like, how do you get yourself to where, like, you walk off the court? I mean, I've certainly had matches to where you just walk off the court like, did that just actually happen? Did I really just lose that player? And then I will just like abuse myself for days after that. So how do you get over that?
This is a really interesting phenomenon for me. The hierarchy in different players' minds of who is better, who is worse.
I'm better, Ian. I'm better. No, anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we have this kind of pecking order in our head of all the players on our local courts or at our club or wherever it is that we play, and we have these perceptions in our own mind. I'd love to hear the player that Judy lost to. I would love to hear her perception of, hey, do you think you're better or worse than Judy? Because like we have these different relative like rankings in our head. At the end of the day, the court doesn't care. The score doesn't care how pretty Judy's opponent's strokes are. The score doesn't care whose outfit is prettier, who makes it look better. The score doesn't care who hits the ball harder or who hits the ball with more spin. All of these things that we tend to fixate on, whose strokes look prettier, who's smoother, who looks like a better player. And that's really kind of what I'm getting at here is we have our own criteria, our own things that to us equate to good player. But until the ball actually starts to fly back and forth and we start to keep track, it's all meaningless. It's all irrelevant. One of the last singles matches that I played was against a guy who I thought for sure I was going to lose to. And this was actually a really interesting experience for me because in the past, like past Ian would have totally fixated on that and probably self-destructed and said, oh, like I'm screwed. I might as well swing for the fences. And I probably would have beat myself. But I remained as objective, and neutral as possible. And I was like, all right, well, let's just see what happens. And I ended up actually winning easily. He emotionally totally like self-destructed, and I barely had to do anything. Even though I didn't feel especially like good that day, I won the match easily. And so the flip side can totally also be true, where we see that person warming up on the other side of the net and their technique looks, funky, like they don't have pockets in their shorts or whatever. It's like, oh man, this guy's an amateur. The second that we grab onto that and we judge them and we perceive them to be a certain level, we're setting ourselves up for disaster. Because the very first time that we lose a game to that person with a frying pan, serve and no pockets in their shorts, we immediately start, as you said, Pete, like berating ourselves. And how can we possibly expect to perform well at that point in time? So I think a huge part of this is perception, it's judgment. We need to let go of those things as much as possible and just allow ourselves to be in the moment and just hit the best shots we can hit. And if it turns out at the end of an hour or 2 hours that they have more points than we do, then hats off to them. Shake their hand and tell them good match. But the whole judgment thing like doesn't help us at all.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Ian, you are awesome today. There's another question here that I'm going to kind of take. It's like, do you have any off-court mental exercises? And it's one of those things where if you like today's presentation that we did, you're going to love what we have for you next. If you're on my email list, Ian has agreed to where I can share his 3-part series, which is really, really good. I watched it. It's fun to watch. It's inspirational. You're going to learn a lot out of it. And so if you're on my email list, and a lot of people I assume that are watching this live right now are, if you are not on my email list and you're on my YouTube channel, and I'll put somewhere where you can get on my email list on this video once it becomes live on YouTube. Get on the email list, and I'm going to be sending this training to you in a couple of days, because it really is good. It was one of the best online training series I've ever seen. So Ian, can you kind of talk them through what they're going to be getting in that 3-part series, and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, I think probably what's most important to say is the vast majority of what I conveyed over the last hour or so, I've learned from a really good friend of mine and coach. His name is Ed Sang, and Ed and I did this training series together. So it's kind of a little bit of role reversal in that series. I'm the person that's kind of picking Ed's brain and really kind of trying to draw out his process. He coaches athletes, business people, high performers in all kinds of different disciplines, how to reach their peak performance. And so he and I teamed up to create this video series. He's extremely insightful. He's like the Mr. Miyagi of, like coaches or tennis coaches. Like, he's super, super calm, super chill, and just kind of has a calm confidence about him and the way that he explains things that, for me, really resonates strongly with me. And I think what's most surprising for me over the years has been, and continues to be, is just how simple his approach is. And you may have noticed, if you've watched all the way through today's conversation that Pete and I have had, you'll notice that I haven't given any like steps. And that's not because I'm withholding anything. It's just simply because there is no checklist to mental toughness. And during this 3-part series that Pete's talking about, Ed and I really go into detail about why that is, how the brain works, how the mind works, and really just kind of drill down into the stuff that Pete and I have been talking about in a lot more detail.
Mm-hmm. It's really good. There are no steps per se, but there is certainly a way you can, get better mentally, and they do a great job. I know that Ed, whenever I go to a USPTA conference where I'm just going there for education, or if I'm there to speak, and if there's anything on mental toughness, he is always the guy giving the speech, and the room is always jam-packed with coaches wanting to see what he's going to say next, and everybody kind of does their water cooler talk afterwards, like, yeah, that was really good. That was really good. So it is good stuff. You will be getting it in a couple of days from my email. If you're on my email list, if you're not, get on it. And with that, I just want to thank Ian for coming out. He has a very busy schedule. I think you're going off to Palm Springs here maybe tomorrow and the next day or so, right? Can you tell us what you're going to be doing out there?
Yeah, I'm leaving on Friday. We're going to be running 4 different 2-day clinics during the Indian Wells tournament in Indian Wells. So looking forward to that very much. We're doing 2 that are singles focused and 2 that are doubles focused. And we'll be working with a couple of private students during our time there as well. So yeah, it's my favorite. I'm lucky that I'm really super blessed to be able to now go and basically spend the whole month of March every year in Indian Wells. So coming from Wisconsin, it's amazing. I can't wait.
All right. So guys, if you're watching today's video and you really liked it, definitely you can give this a thumbs up on YouTube. If you're watching the replay, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and go subscribe to Ian's channel, Essential Tennis, so he can get 10 bazillion subscribers, because he's getting close. And thanks again, guys. I'm going to end this broadcast. Thanks so much.
How do we get on your email list again, Peter?
Well, basically on any of you can go to crunchtimecoaching.com, and I've got a free 7 steps to a powerful serve right there on the front page. And on this video, I'm actually at the end, I'm going to be putting a place where they can sign up to get some free instruction, as well as most of my YouTube videos do have a place where you can get on there. So
awesome.
Cool. All right. I'm stopping it. And that was awesome, Ian.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it very much.